Good morning, everyone. Lee Henson, President and Founder of AgileDad, and it's time for today's episode of the Daily Stand-Up. So without any further ado, let's get started. Today, I wanted to review a letter that was written in on Reddit, and it was a letter that was regarding Agile, and it was about adapting to change versus sticking to a plan. And I'm going to read the letter to you, and then we'll talk about it for a moment, and I'll give you some feedback. It starts off, "Hi guys, some context. My company that I am working for has been transitioning into Agile for the last 2+ years. I joined 1.5 years ago when some Agile practice is already in place, but there are a lot of relics, especially in terms of mindset. Recently, what I found is that my team is very resistant to changes made during the sprint. Last week, a client requested a fix to be available on Thursday instead of Monday, but our deployment schedule is on every Monday and Thursday at 10 p.m. This means we will have to request a special deployment on Wednesday. Due to a series of events, the ticket wasn't ready to deploy ahead of the Thursday schedule anyway, so we decided to just deploy it on Thursday. A team member, however, was very adamant about not even entertaining the thought of requesting a special deployment. Their stance was that we should only deploy out of schedule when it's super urgent or important, and that we shouldn't even discuss it to begin with. As a product owner, it's important to know the options, especially to respond to stakeholders. And in this case, if it was not changing anything in terms of our effort, then I think it's fair to see if we can push it earlier. What do you think?" This conversation has driven so much traffic to Reddit. And it's just so interesting to me to see some of the replies and some of the responses. I've seen everything from, it was perfectly fine to change, get it out there, and do your thing, to wow, that's a bad idea. You shouldn't look at it that way. You should stick to your plan. So the question is, when it comes to an end consumer, is adapting to change more important, or is sticking to the plan more important? And we all know that the Agile Manifesto teaches us to embrace changes early and often. The Agile Manifesto says embrace changes even late so that we can get things delivered to the client. And I think this boils down to what our focus is. And this to me is a perfect opportunity to talk about symptoms. So one of the things that I often talk about is the Scrum Master is a lot like a doctor. They're required to listen to symptoms. They're required to diagnose. They're required to figure out what's happening. And then they can write a prescription. And then after they write that prescription, they can come back and say, this is what's wrong. This is what's happening. Here's the prescription. And it's up to the team to responsibly take that prescription and to see to it that they're doing it the way that it was as prescribed and filling the prescription themselves, that type of work. But in this case, the question is adapting to changes late, even during a sprint, even a good thing? So let me give you 2 points of view here. My first point of view is our focus should be on outcome, not output. And if that's true, then I don't know that being very, how shall I put it, deliberate about our output being a certain thing and it's all we can deliver and sticking to that plan is as important as making our customer happy. However, I also see that interrupting things during a sprint can cause great stress to the team. It could cause them to feel like they are not being listened to as far as, they commit to things and then they're not being asked to stick to the things they commit to. They're the work's being changed out from under them, so to speak. And last but not least, I think that, with regard to the delivery schedule, if we get in the habit of making special exceptions and releasing on demand, if you will, then it sets a precedent for other people, both internal and external, to have that ability to ask us to release on demand. So I certainly see the consequence of some of these changes. So here are my thoughts regarding this letter. So starting at the top, I appreciate the context about the company and how they feel like they're working in Agile for 2 years, et cetera. But one of the things I found is that time doesn't necessarily equal how proficient you are. I've had organizations that are just getting started doing Agile that are just ramping up and they're high performing and they're really exciting to watch, and they do a fantastic job of delivering things. And on the flip side, I've had other organizations where they've been doing this for years and they still can't get it right. So I think the question becomes, it's not about how long you've been doing Agile, but it's about how well you've been doing Agile. And in the sense of relics, when I talk about in terms of mindset and the way of thinking, my guess or my first thought is that you're talking about having a solid thought process versus fixed mindset versus growth mindset, right? the team may be still in a fixed mindset, but still practicing agile. They're doing their stand-ups regularly. They're doing things in 2-week sprints, whatever the case may be. So they still have that agile mindset, so to speak, but they're not necessarily, they're doing agile, not behaving agile. They're doing agile, but not being agile, if that makes sense. And that's common in a lot of organizations that I see. Usually what I find is that when a team is resistant to change, that means one or two things. One, the team got burned by change before, where they were asked to change something and then it didn't work out, or the right things didn't get delivered. Or that when a team's resistant to change, that usually means that they are confident in their ability to finish the things that they've vetted and that they know, but that the unknowns scare them, and that they're being held to a commitment to complete unknowns, and that that's a challenge for them. So I think part of my thought here is that, right out of the gate, number one, you should never, and this is a rare thing, you hardly ever hear me say that word, but you should never swap things out during a sprint. You shouldn't say, I'm going to take this thing out and put this thing in. Having a team recommit to something in mid sprint just because a change came about, whether it was urgent or not, is not the right way to go about doing this. If there is something that's introduced that needs to be changed, you need to have one of three sets of mind. One, it's important enough to kill everything and have all hands on deck work on it. An example of that would be Amazon not being able to accept credit card payments online. It's so severe that I don't care who has to stop, the world can stop to make sure that that gets fixed. Two, it's important enough to put as the first item in our next sprint. It's something that we know that we're not going to interrupt the team to do right now, but it's something urgent enough that it should be the very first item that we address in the upcoming sprint, or the upcoming release in this case. The third option is that it really isn't that important, and it's something that we can mark as known but not resolved. We can archive it, and we can fix it in an upcoming version of the product, but not necessarily try to fix everything backwards and reverse engineer everything we currently have. Following more of an Apple mindset instead of a competitor mindset. So it's just a way to sort of get through what you should do with these interruptions that come in. Now, I have had situations where that urgent thing, somebody said, is there any way it can be done during a sprint? And if it's something that's really that important, I have done this, and this is probably about as far as I'll go. I've taken an item out of a sprint where the team has not begun on it. So if the team has not started on an item, I'll take that item out. As a natural result, the team will finish early during that sprint. And when a team finishes their work early during that sprint, they'll often come back and say, hey, what do you want us to work on next? I'm like, why don't you take a look at the one on the top of the backlog? And it's a new item, one maybe they haven't vetted, the new item that's come in. Now, honestly, it's not part of their current commitment. So that's the good news. So they don't need to recommit to that item. So it's not part of the commitment, but it is still important for them to look at that and to say, okay, it wasn't part of our original commitment, but what can we do? And that's the whole part about responding to change. And I think that responding to change and having change forced upon you are two different things. Being adaptable or malleable is important, but having change just imposed upon you, imposition, is something totally different, right? So you want to make sure that you're not imposing changes on people. With regard to the delivery cadence, the deployment schedules every Monday and Thursday at 10 p.m. My argument would be this team's rocking and rolling. They're doing great. If you're deploying, if you're doing CI and CD and you're getting things out twice a week, and your goal is CD, congratulations, you're well on your way. I wouldn't say that this is a low performance team. Now, the team member that's adamant about not changing anything or not entertaining those requests of that nature is probably right in this situation, meaning that if we're going to deploy outside of the schedule, pardon the expression, but it may be for a darn good reason, right? I don't want it to be just setting precedent for people to start asking for things outside of our normal cycle. And as a product owner, I think it's important for you to have that heartbeat with the team as well, and stick to your lean Kanban liking. Put the agile framework around it, but stick to that lean Kanban attitude. If we're going to build things small, we're going to get them out early. We're going to make our customers happy. We're going to reduce waste. We're going to eliminate waste. We're going to do everything we can to focus on outcome. And I think that if you do this, it's going to allow you to see that change isn't always a bad thing, that change can actually be something very good. Well, I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Daily Stand-Up. I hope you learned a lot. As always, we invite you to visit agiledad.com, where you can learn more about this topic or any others. And if you have a topic you want to hear about in a Daily Stand-Up, feel free to reach out to us at learnmore@agiledad.com. We'd love to entertain your topic. And as always, we encourage you to stay healthy, stay well, and stay agile, my friends. Until next time, do take care.